Hey there, welcome to Lotus Lily, Art of Sacred Embodiment. Thanks for being here and joining. So, today I want to talk about our spiritual path, and it's more of an inquiry, I guess, in some ways, of what is your. Sorry, my dryer is going, in case you're hearing ruckus in the background. Um, what is your path? Do you have a sense of what your path entails, what it means to you, what theme it carries? And when I say the theme that it carries, I'm talking about your essence from within you that is guiding you. And do you follow that essence? So oftentimes when we probably at many junctures of our awakening, we think we've landed on, oh, this is my path, right? That might be, this is the practice that I am doing, right? I'm a yogi. I'm a meditator. I am a Buddhist. I am, a Christian. So we give it a label, which labels are fine because they help us to orient and understand. Labels hold information, right, about what a body of understanding offers us. And so that orients us to, why am I here? Right? What is it that I'm receiving that resonates with me? But if we get locked into labels, then we can stay only within a specific box because that's all we start to know. And what I have found, and I'll just say from my perspective, the masculine tendency, right, the polarity of the masculine can stay focused and a little bit more locked in to the rigidity and the structure of the I am. This is what I am. This is what I'm doing. This is who I am. Whereas the feminine way of orienting is more fluid. It moves from, oh, I'm this, oh, but now I'm really sensing this speaks to me or calls to me. Oh, but now I want to go over here, right? So it does not allow us to drop into, I'm not going to say grounding, but it doesn't allow us to get too stuck, to get too rigid, to even become too consistent. All right. Now, everybody gets to find their right marriage along your trajectory. The way that I look at our spiritual path and what calls to us at any point in time is that is our soul supporting us in remembering something that we already know. It's remembering a part of ourselves and then bringing it home. So, for instance, when I very first started out on my journey, my awakening, before I even considered a spiritual path, I was in AA, and I guess you could say that was my spiritual path. And my period of time was just trying to form a relationship with a higher power because I was raised in an atheist background and had a lot of reactivity against, God, religion, primarily Western Christianity. So coming to terms with something bigger and a higher power was a challenge for me. And the word God was just like, don't even use that word because it would just rile me up. But that wasn't actually all of my energy. A lot of that came from my parents' resistance, and I just took it on as an identity that wasn't mine. So that was that beginning of opening up to a spiritual orientation. And then next came the universe, right? I could hold the concept of the universe. And while I was in AA, I started recognizing and noticing that, one of the slogans that we used was that God would do for us what we could not do for ourselves. And I didn't use that word at first. I would use the universe would do for me, but I couldn't do for myself. But I started recognizing that that was true. And then I formed this relationship with the Serenity Prayer. That was when I first began being able to use the word God, and and that God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Was Boy, that was a medicine for me. Whenever I was wanting to drink, whenever times got really rough, because I had a lot of rough periods in my first few years of sobriety. I had a couple really rough relationships, and I was also pretty codependent, so I had my addiction to the substances, and then I also had my addiction to people. And so I had to really utilize something other than my will. And before I went through my awakening process, and I write about this in my book, and it's the opening to my book, Awakening from the Dream, a Kundalini memoir. So I'll put the link down below for you. The intro is having this deep experience from being sick and coming out of being sick, and all of a sudden my perspective and my consciousness had completely shifted, and I had no idea what it was or what it meant or what was going on, but I started feeling this this call to, like, incense and candles and tapestries, and this inkling of yoga kind of started percolating in the background. And this was in 1995, end of 95, going into 1996. There wasn't a lot of yoga around, there wasn't a lot of meditation, even though I was on the West Coast, and the West Coast was, a bit more progressed than maybe the Midwest, the middle part of the country, coastal areas usually are. Um, I There was something in me that was shifting, and before long, the whole Eastern Indian culture started really talking to me, and I didn't understand what it was or why. So fast forward, um, when I went through my Kundalini awakening, the bulk of it, right? That initial big initiation that lasted for a couple of years, but that first year led me to yoga, or rather, the impulse within me led me to yoga, led me to my guru, and put me firmly on a path of the divine feminine, rooted in a Shakti Kundalini tradition. Okay, so that became the lens in which I began to grow and evolve and connect with God in these expressions within that tradition. I thought I was on my path, like this was my path. And I began identifying with it to, some degrees, and 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 foreseeing that this would be my trajectory. I really wanted to go to India. I wanted to go live in the ashram with my guru, even though he didn't have an ashram. I wanted that life. And within 2 years, 3 years, I was then being led, still through that yogic tradition, through my connection with Paramahansa Yogananda. Paramahansa Yogananda, right there, through next to, right there. Right, so I had started connecting with Yogananda ethereally, and he became a beautiful guide for me. And I received so many teachings and downloads from him, and that was when I started opening a little bit more through his guidance to Jesus. And so I got very confused, right? Like, wait a minute, no, I'm supposed to be on a yogic tradition. And yet, where he was pointing me was towards Christianity, but not exoteric Christianity, right? Not the Christianity of denominations and organizations and church. Esoteric, the inner connection with the Christ. And so hence my path changed again. And the yogic elements that I had yearned for began to subside. But what I realized within their subsiding was that they didn't leave me. They were now within me. I had reclaimed parts of my soul consciousness, my soul that had already traveled that path, and I had brought them home to me, right? Because we're scattered. We're fragmented as humans. Our souls become fragmented over lifetimes, over trauma, over unresolved issues, over a number of things. So I had called those parts of my soul back. Then I was on this trajectory with Jesus, and then Mary Magdalene, and they started bringing into me the divine union, the sacred masculine and feminine, the divine masculine and feminine. They began then teaching me about those inner mystical teachings. And so I thought that was my path for quite some time. And I traveled that path. I went to school at the Tree of Life for the Essene priestess training. Hence, I found out, that was a purely Judaic organization, community, and that was not what I expected. And yet, the Middle East continued to call to me, and the Hebrew language continued to call and speak to me. And Jesus sort of, was not quite as prominent during that time. Now, so what you might start to catch on here is that we attune to different frequencies. Every tradition, everything that we're doing carries frequency and vibration and consciousness. And so I was being led through my soul to come back into wholeness through the yogic frequency, specifically that divine feminine of the inner practice of the Shakti tradition and the Kundalini. And then not through the exoteric, but the inner teachings and the inner connection with Jesus and then Magdalene. And then through the more Judaic teachings. So what I was recognizing as I was going through these reclamations of my own soul's journey, I was remembering, oh my gosh, I have these lifetimes. I was this. This is why this is coming through me naturally. I am remembering that aspect, that higher self of me, that soul presence of me. And then I'm remembering this soul presence and this connection and this time when I lived in devotion and when I walked side by side with Jesus and his community during his time walking on this planet. And then the Judaic time that was not necessarily embracing Jesus, right, as the Savior, as prophet, in the same way that Christianity did. So I kept going through these phases and stages of deepening and remembering pieces of myself and bringing them home. And then after I left the Essenes and that came to a completion, I was still kind of confused about all this, right? I would still get, sort of discombobulated, like, oh my gosh, how is this happening again? What am I doing wrong? What am I missing? And there was nothing that I was missing. The soul was the leader of my journey, not my personality, not my beliefs, not any constructs or ideas of how I thought I was supposed to show up. And then this continued, right? And then I was sort of in the mix of all of these for a period of time. And moving to Los Angeles, my ex-husband and I at the time, Byron, we had been for years, we had been hunkered down in these very devotional, almost like a modern day ascetic lifestyle. We were not oriented in the outer world at all. We lived very simply. We did not go out into the world to experience, things or places or, well, that's not true. We did do some things that were like really aligned with the path we were traveling. But those were, they were very ceremonial, ritualistic, in beautiful senses. They were raw foods oriented because at that time, raw foods essentially, originally, is really about our spiritual awakening and creating a spiritual container for our light body. Many of the forerunners in the raw foods movement, the forefathers, this is a lot of their teachings, that the higher frequency of taking in life brings more light into our body. Hence, that light then, as the frequency rises, can support creating our light body. So that was actually sort of a big part of that path. And then we left and we got to Los Angeles. We were called to LA. Like it was the last place on earth that either of us wanted to go. It was very materialistic. It was very money driven. It was very, everybody's out there. Egos are big. But this is where we were called. And so we knew that everything that we'd been learning was preparing us now to step out And we knew that we would be tested in the land of plenty, through living in LA. And we were tested. And the intensity with which we had lived, um, and the levels of deep devotion that we were anchored in began to sort of dissipate a little bit. And, we loved LA. We loved LA. There were so many things to do, so many places to go, so many good restaurants to go to, so many good vegan and raw food restaurants, better yet. And so yeah, we played a lot. But we knew that we were being, yes, tested, but we were learning discernment through this process. We were learning, we couldn't always learn discernment cloaked in a safe environment, right? In our own ashram. Discernment comes from being out, being tested, really knowing, what have I grounded and rooted? What have I really learned, and what have I embodied? So this was 6 years, I think, in LA. An amazing 6 years. We loved it the entire time for the most part. Um, and during that time is when the Ascension began, when light language started coming forth. I never left, I never left my practices, my prayer, my connection with God, my deepening. It just got that and everything else. But when light language started coming through, this started opening up another path. And that path was that of ascension. And now for me, because I was rooted primarily in very traditional, culturally rich, thousands of years of lineages. So the ascension was a little woo woo for me. It was a little new age for me. It was a little, I had judgment around it. I had wariness around it. I had, some things at arm's length around it. And even the light language, I was very, as that started opening up, I I did a lot of praying around it. I stayed connected to who I was working with then, within, Magdalene and primarily Mary Magdalene at that time. Um, and I learned through discernment. I learned through watching what my experience was and how it shifted me. Because I had learned from my teachers that because everything is consciousness, you want to be mindful what you're taking in. Is it truly there for the upliftment of your soul, or is it there just for the experience or the woo-woo of it, so to speak? And how is it serving your deep soul growth? And I've talked about this in other videos on light language, which you can see. Through testing, through stepping in, I was able to ascertain how much more love was coming in rapidly, how much more joy I was feeling, and how much more of my density or habits, thought forms, emotional karma that I was still working with, how quickly it dropped away. It was fast. And I recognized that it was not separate from the Kundalini journey. It was a part of it. It was a new phase of it. It was an extension almost of my Reiki training, because I started recognizing the symbols and the ways in which Reiki worked with me. So you notice I'm not saying that I worked with Reiki. The way that Reiki worked with and through me, I was recognizing some synchronicities with the light language. So I learned over time to trust it, have faith in it, and that began moving through me as my primary mode of working with others. So all of this is to say, so now all of that is part of my journey. And yet my journey continues to morph and to shift because it is evolving me. And so, when we moved to where we're at now in the Midwest from LA, Mother Mary came on the scene. I had never been drawn to Mother Mary, connected to Mother Mary. It just didn't really resonate. And immediately she came on the scene, and the Pleiadians came on the scene. Even though, right, hindsight showed me the Pleiadians had already been with me from 1998, but I was not ready for that. I wasn't ready for that information yet. And so now, right, as each evolutionary phase takes place, we get to look back and see where these parts of us have always been spiraling around with us, working with us to remember us home. And at this phase and stage, since I've been working with the Divine Union for, goodness, since, like 2003, in my own inner ways, and that has shifted and morphed and changed and come and gone and spiraled around, that now is ready to come more to the forefront. So the beauty of all of this and the questions that I come back to, what is the essence of your path right now? What is it that you are being called to? And are you listening to your call? And what is the resonance? What is the frequency? What is the vibration of that call? Right? Are you called, and are you feeding on the light and being imbued and infused with the consciousness of that which is uplifting and enlivening you with the highest expressions of you? This is how we move from the sacredness of our humanness into our divinity. If we're taking in denser practices, thought forms, information, music, entertainment, books, right? Anything. Foods that don't have life but that are dead. The language that we use, the ways in which we treat ourselves and treat others. And none of this is about perfection, but it's becoming aware. And it's always fine tuning into that next highest, most coherent and heart-centered expression. It's a process, right? There isn't a finish line per se. And And are we allowing ourselves to flow with each new path? So here's the cautionary note with this, right? I think for younger people, because there's so much, because the awakening is quickening, right? And many of the younger people, you're here for this time. So that awakening process is going to happen rapidly. And so there's this balance. If we're only focused outside of us, right? It's easy to go from here to here to here to here to here without questioning, without inquiring on a deeper internal wisening process. And recognizing that while we still flow from soul remembrance, we still have to dig a well. So back in the day, it was like, find your path and dig down one well, because that's where you're going to find the living waters. And that confused me in the earlier parts when I was moving, because I was like, digging the well, digging the well, digging the well. And I still give that advice to do people. You want to dig your well, because you're still going to get pulled, because that's just the nature of the awakening process in the very beginning. So I like to emphasize this, digging the well, and then find the themes of what you're drawn to. Find the thread that connects what you're drawn to, so that you're gaining the coherence of what it is your soul essence is. There's a reclamation that's happening. There is a deeper embodying and coming home to your own wholeness that is happening. But you have to give it time, right? It's got to cultivate. It's got to gestate. You have to bring it home and spend time learning within. So for me, it became very clear from the beginning, and everything that my life consisted of, even before my awakening, that relationship and the path of the feminine was my path. I was on a path of the sacred feminine from, I could safely say, from the time I was 17 or 18. But I had to go through many renditions of the dark feminine first, to do my deeper healing. So listen not with your outer ears, but with your heart. What is it? What is the theme? Take them deeper into internal contemplations, into your meditations, and allow your awareness to be open and spacious, not to be pulled everywhere, but to be aware of what is pulling you. Because there are some things that will pull you, that is your shadow, because you're still carrying that frequency and that vibration. So there will still be that resonance, and it can be dressed up in spiritual constructs, even though it carries a level of darkness and density. And I'm not saying that isn't yours to explore, because that's all part of the journey. However, be mindful that you don't have to dive in deep to learn what you need to learn or heal what you need to heal. Because sometimes that kind of density, it becomes sticky, right? It's not good or bad. It just becomes sticky based on the consciousness that it carries and the frequency that it carries and the ways that it expresses that it carries. So the spiritual journey is deep and wide and high. It's light and dark. And we get to choose what parts of our spiritual journey we want to really strengthen and nourish and nurture and enliven and live that reality. So I think I'm going to stop here because this is getting long. So yeah, so what is your path, right? What are the phases and stages of your path? How can you look back and connect the dots, and do you see your evolution and growth? Do you sense and feel higher expressions, higher qualities coming online and coming to life? This does not necessarily mean, you know, um, just because I have, psychic abilities or can do certain kinds of healing. That's not really what we're talking about. Those are aspects, those are elements that we can get stuck in as well and think that is us, that is our spirituality, that is what we're here for. But there's so much more that happens inside that is evolving us. All right. So, any comments? As always, I would love to hear. What is your experience? What do you notice? What has your trajectory been? Do you feel kind of stuck here and there? Has it been confusing, right? Because I promise you're not alone. All right. Many blessings. Much love.